How will the unraveling of affirmative action programs impact the Los Angeles Police Department? Are politics and affirmative action having an impact on the Los Angeles Police Department? Police Chief Willie Williams will answer these questions, so stay tuned to Full Disclosure. Welcome to Full Disclosure. I'm Leslie Dutton. Today we're going to bring you the news behind the news with Los Angeles Police Chief Willie Williams on affirmative action and the impact of politics on the police department. Following this program, we're going to ask you, the viewers, to vote and express your opinion on today's topics. Just a few months ago, Chief Willie Williams' popularity with the public reached an all-time high, higher than any other Los Angeles politician. Since that time, he's been faced with enormous challenges, surviving them all. But probably one of the most challenging will be what lies ahead with the proposed dismantling of affirmative action programs. Thanks so much for being with us today, Chief.
Thank you for inviting me.
We appreciate it. What is going to happen with all the talk of an initiative up in Sacramento on affirmative action and what the governor's doing with the university? How do you think that'll impact what you're doing with the police department?
Well, I think we've got several challenges ahead of us. One, the Los Angeles Police Department, like most major law enforcement agencies, has a history of having several court and consent decrees governing our hiring. There's been a real push by the city government to make sure that our agency is more reflective of the greater community that it serves, and under these guidelines, we've certainly been able to do that. We're not quite there, but we're a long way from where we were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. So there's some concern and some review of what would happen if some of these guidelines are either cut out through the state or through federal legislation in the years to come. We're also looking at the impact of proposed changes, even though they're probably years away, and what that means in terms of community concerns. Los Angeles is probably ethnically one of the most diverse cities in the United States, if not the world. And whenever you change a policy, particularly affirmative action policy, you may please one group but displease another. And we certainly want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to voice their displeasure in a proper and lawful way, but we also have some concerns. We want to make sure that things don't get out of hand.
Yes. Well, now, there's been a lot of discussion about quotas. Some people say there are quotas. They do have quotas in their affirmative action programs. Does the Los Angeles Police Department have a quota? Do you set a goal of how many people you take in under the affirmative action guidelines?
The city government has established a goal for at least 20 years dealing with ethnic minorities, Latinos, African Americans. We have a voluntary goal dealing with Asians. We have a voluntary goal dealing with the hiring of women set by City Council in 1993 and 1994. And this is managed through the city's personnel department, and we follow those guidelines in terms of our hiring.
So then there's an actual, when you say goal, there's an actual number that you strive to achieve.
Well, there's not a numeric number. We have a goal that with these different groups to see if we can come close to having them reflect the population either within the city, the county, or the metropolitan area in Southern California, which includes Los Angeles County. But there are no goals that says you hire 6 of these and 4 of these. But when reaching these goals, I think one of the most important things is that there's been no change and no reduction in the qualification of any individual coming into the department, and there's been no change in reduction in qualifications during the training process.
So they all basically have to have the same measure of qualification, then they're all equal, so to speak.
You have to pass the written exam, you have to pass the oral exam, you have to pass each and every state mandated qualifier once you're in the police academy, otherwise you don't graduate and pin on a badge as an LAPD officer.
I see. Now, let's say that this initiative, the Civil Rights Initiative, is it called the Civil Rights Initiative?
That's what it's called, yes.
Yeah, that would mandate abolition of the affirmative action programs. What do you think that would do to the police department? Would that mean that you would no longer have goals?
Well, the program that's currently being examined here in California will not have any direct impact on our hiring goals in the LAPD because they're not state-mandated initiatives, which the Civil Rights Act, as it's called, is being put on a ballot this coming year. So there will be no immediate change in terms of our hiring goals. There may be some long-term changes in terms of other state or federal or other city agencies in terms of their hiring, they're giving out of bids for contracts and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, how about in the area of promotions? Is affirmative action a consideration there when you're looking, let's say, to move people up the ladder in the department?
Well, the affirmative action is involved, but there's two types of affirmative action. One affirmative action, there is one consent decree that indicates that in the last 6 months, if we have not reached our numeric goals, then we can skip over other people in an attempt to reach it, but we only can go so far down on the list. There's another type of affirmative action, which is the primary responsibility and goal of the City of Los Angeles, where if all things are equal, all scores are equal, and you look and you are short, say, significantly a number of women in a particular assignment. Mm-hmm. If all the scores and everything else is equal, the city's affirmative action policy says that it is right and appropriate to then reach down and select a woman from this pool of equally qualified candidates, or select an Asian or an African American or a white or whomever it might be, a Latino, mm-hmm. From this general pool. So there are court-mandated guidelines which require us to move forward on a list. Then there is a policy where you have a group of equally qualified people, but you are short in certain demographical areas that we reach down. I
see. How does this impact the morale of the department? Do you find that it creates any problems at all?
I wish I could say it didn't. But when you're dealing with human beings and when you're dealing with something as personal as hiring, as promotions, as opportunities to move vertically and laterally in the organization, it's going to impact morale. But it impacts morale both ways. It impacts the morale of any of those individuals who feel that they're being passed over for someone else, and I can't put myself in their shoes, mm-hmm. but I understand that. But it also impacts the morale of those individuals who feel for whatever reason they have historically not been given an equal opportunity, and this is a chance to get them in on an even playing field where they can then compete competitively and evenly with other people in the ball game. Mm-hmm. So it's a two-edged sword. I think long-term, depending on who you talk to, there are no winners or losers.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any program to kind of help soften the blow when you do have to pass people over for affirmative action reasons?
What we do is whenever we pass them, and let's say for the last 3 years, we've only had to pass over about 10 or 12 people, because the majority of the candidates in all the pools are doing much better on the promotional exams. And so the natural order of the list is addressing most of our needs. But when in the past we've had to, we always make sure that we personally contact our personnel department, personally contacts both the labor organization that represents these employees and the individual, and is very frank and tells them why. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'll point out, for example, last year on our lieutenant's exam, we had met all our goals except in one, and we didn't pass over what most people think would just be whites. We passed over an African American because we had reached or exceeded our goal in African Americans. So affirmative action can pass over more than just traditionally white males or white females in an agency.
Oh, I see. Well, we have to take a break. We'll be right back in just a minute to talk with Los Angeles Police Chief Willie Williams about the use of force and the recent police-involved shooting in Lincoln Heights.
There are many misconceptions about the 2 million people who suffer epileptic seizures in this country.
Wow, that was weird.
I thought he was having a heart attack.
I don't see how a guy with epilepsy can hold such an important job.
Yeah, and what if someone catches it from him?
Epilepsy is not contagious. It's not a disease. In most cases, it's a controllable disorder of the central nervous system. Epileptics can live full and productive lives. To get the facts about epilepsy right, the Will Rogers Institute, White Plains, New York.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure. We're talking with Los Angeles Police Chief Willie Williams. Well, I wanted to talk to you about what's happened in Lincoln Heights. There's been a lot of tension and the community's been concerned about that police-involved shooting. Can you give us a little of your perspective on what's happened here and why it's gotten to be such a pressure point?
Well, I think that any time you have an officer-involved shooting where there's a fatality, there should be, and it certainly should be expected to be, a high level of community interest. What has occurred in Lincoln Heights over the past 2 weeks is that there was a lot of misinformation put out the first couple of nights. If you looked at television, you thought we were getting ready to be involved in World War III. There was no riot. There was nothing close to a riot. There were some criminals involved in brick and bottle throwing at the police. Through the training that we instituted after the '92 riots, we were able to go in, put it down very quickly, minimum use of force, minimum number of people were arrested for minor issues. What it then presented was an opportunity to get closer to some people in those communities whom we had not been able to get close to for a number of reasons. Myself and others have probably met with community leaders at least a dozen times. I've had at least a half dozen meetings over the past 7 or 8 days with religious leaders, community leaders, political leaders, civic leaders, and we're taking a crisis which none of us wanted and turning it into an opportunity to grow, to get the community and the police closer together, to get not just community-oriented policing, but community-oriented government working. And at the same time, I've told them, the president of the Board of Police Commissioners has told the people in the community and the city, and the mayor, we're going to have a thorough, open, expedited, but full investigation of the shooting, and the report will be made public after its final review by the Board of Police Commissioners, which is a civilian arm of our government.
You know, Mayor Riordan was quoted as saying in the LA Times with regards to this shooting, he said that it was the Brown Berets and the communists that were out there agitating the people in the community. Are you aware of that?
We are aware that there have been some people from outside the community or outside the city, without naming which group, because everybody who belongs to a group is not wrong or criminal, but there has been some outside agitation. And one of the strong things is that the community leaders, the people who live in those neighborhoods, have sent the message to these outside folks to get out of our neighborhood, get out of our city. We will deal and manage these issues ourselves. And I think that's one of the reasons that we really have had a quick arresting of the disorder that occurred the first 2 nights.
But to get back to Mayor Riordan's observation, when he used the term communist, it kind of surprised some people, because I think a lot of folks think communism is dead. Where does the mayor of one of the largest cities come up with the thought that the communists are involved?
Well, some of the people there, the mayor his information was correct. We have all types of political parties that are active to some degree or another in America. I mean, the Communist Party is no more banned in America than the Democrats or the Republicans. We didn't say that they're large, we didn't say that they're very active, but the mayor's information, based on what we knew those first couple of nights, was not incorrect.
Where did he get that information?
Well, he got it from a number of sources, law enforcement, community, and others.
Well, how would he know? I mean, is there, were they handing out flyers, or were they, how did they?
In some cases, yes. I mean,
really?
This is the United States. All political parties, including the Communist Party and others, can go and tack posters up on walls, paste them up on buildings, put them on the side of cars. You know, in a free society, those types of actions, whether you agree or disagree with them, are permissible. So, I mean, it was not hard to get that type of information. It came from the public. It wasn't all, you know, super secret spy stuff by the police. And the mayor, as the leader of this city, certainly should have had that information and chose to do the responsible thing by putting all the facts on the table so the public understood what was going on, and then was able to make the appropriate decisions.
You know, I've had the good fortune of working with a lot of people in South Central Los Angeles over my years of involvement in the community. I worked with people in Imperial Courts Housing Project. And I remember during the riots, there was, you know, actual flyers being distributed by the Communist Party, and they were saying that this wasn't a riot, it was a rebellion, it was a revolution. The Republican and Democratic parties don't hand out flyers like that. Doesn't that make your job tougher when you've got a political party, the communists albeit, out there handing out those flyers?
It makes law enforcement's job tougher when any political entity, whether they're big or small or to the left or the right, you know, gets involved in community activities in a negative way. But most major law enforcement agencies like Los Angeles, we've learned to deal with it. We know how to liaison with all types, and it doesn't significantly hinder our activity. This makes it a little more difficult and challenging some days.
Well, now you used the word liaison, and I know how active you are in community policing and everything. Besides handing out flyers, what else do the communists do? Do they actually sit down at the table and talk with people?
Well, let's not just focus just on the Communist Party, but I mean, there's a lot of splinter groups and groups that are sort of off the mainstream, and we try to liaison with anybody that we can sit down and talk. You know, sometimes you have to try to gather information when you can't talk with them. Quite often, the general public will provide information. I mean, most of these organizations don't operate in a super secret manner the way we might have thought they did back in the 50s and 60s or the way they may operate over in Europe 10 or 20 years ago. They're rather quite open about their business. It's just not something that, we'll say, prior to Oklahoma, you knew that much about those domestic types of operations.
Well, I guess I've just never seen somebody as prominent as the mayor mentioned that they were a factor in a problem for the, such an agency as the police department. So I don't mean to belabor it, but it surprised me.
Well,
it really did.
It took strong leadership on the part of the mayor to come on television and say some things that may not have been politically popular but were correct. Because once you lay the cards on the table and the people in the community and the city understood the facts, they were then able to make decisions in terms of logically where the city government, where the police department should go, rather than trying to whisper behind closed doors, how do we handle this? We let the public know what we were doing.
Yes. Is there anything else you can tell us about the shooting? I know that there's going to be an investigation, is that correct?
There's an investigation regarding an officer-involved shooting, and we can't get into all the details because it wouldn't be appropriate to the officer, it wouldn't be appropriate to the community or to the family of the victim. But as I said before, it's going to be expedited, but it's going to be done thoroughly, completely. It's going to be reviewed by our civilian board, and the decision will be made public. And I have committed to meet with community people. I've already talked with the officer involved in the shooting personally to assure him that he'll get a fair shake within this process. And I think that we'll get through this the same as we have other police shootings or other negative community events.
Very good. Well, we're going to take a break, but when we return, we will be back to talk with Police Chief Willie Williams about police chief politics.
A sharp picture requires a crystal clear lens for a camera or for the eye. Cataracts, which cloud the lens of the eye, are common as we grow older. But more than 1 million times a year, Americans have surgery to treat those clouded lenses with excellent results and a very high rate of success. If your vision is getting worse, chances are modern medicine can help you see better. For a free booklet, write the Will Rogers Institute, White Plains, New York.
Welcome back to Full Disclosure. We're talking with Los Angeles Police Chief Willie Williams about police politics. Boy, these last few months have really focused a lot of attention on you and on the department and on the politics of the department. There's so much going on. We interviewed Stanley Scheinbaum just a month or so ago and asked him if he thought that Proposition F had made the situation politicized here in Los Angeles and made it more difficult for you to do your job. I guess the way we put the question to him was, since the police commission now has the authority to remove the police chief because the civil service protection is gone, does that make you more vulnerable to political pressure? And I'd like to ask you that question. What do you think?
Well, I don't think the nature and intent of Proposition F in and of itself make the chief vulnerable to political pressure, because in my former city, Philadelphia, all of the police commissioners who are like chiefs of police have always worked at the pleasure of the mayor. And I worked at the pleasure of Mayor Good and Mayor Rendell during my 4 years there and was not necessarily subject to undue political pressures or influence. And I have not been here. The difference is that in California, particularly in Los Angeles, chiefs of police up until 1992 were always civil service. Everybody in my department, except me today, is a civil service employee. So you're dealing with a different tradition. I think that some of the challenges of Prop F are to give the public and the community and the city leadership the ability to have a stronger say in the selection and oversight of the chief of police. But there's an expectation that the chief of police, as a general manager of the organization, is still supposed to make the day-to-day decisions with civilian oversight and not be, a puppet or a rubber stamp for whoever happens to be in or out of office. And by and large, that process has worked well to date.
Now, we had Councilman Marvin Brody on the program, and he thinks we ought to go one step farther and make the department heads take away the civil service protection so that you can have more say about removing the department heads. How do you feel about that?
You're talking about the department heads in
the police department?
Well, there are certain probably political areas where as a chief of police you probably should keep your opinions to yourself, but I believe that if properly framed, it would not be too bad a thing if you had 3 or 4 or 5 senior members that weren't in civil service. But I believe if functioning properly, I can operate and work well with all my department heads civil service. They were all civil service in Philadelphia except two. They're all civil service here. And as long as you have good, hard-working men and women who understand their responsibilities, you can get the job done. So if it doesn't change in Los Angeles, and I don't anticipate any changes in the next 5 or 10 years, at least not during the remainder of my term, this term, or next term, I can more than adequately get the job of running the city of Los Angeles done and get it done well.
Well, now let's talk about real political pressure. And we're talking about the city council now. Do you find that you get special requests from city council members for, let's talk about law enforcement in their districts? We've noticed, and we've done some programs on street vendors, for instance, and apparently some councilmen like to have the law enforced, which outlaws street vendors, and others don't want it enforced.
That's right.
Where does that put you?
Well, let me say the first thing. I have never, as a chief of police, been asked, nor would I ever accept a request to do any type of special policing in any part of any city. I had 18 members of council in Philadelphia. I have 15 members of council here. None has called and requested. I think the reason is they understand that would be the wrong thing to do with Willie Williams. We do have to learn how to manage the wants and needs, particularly when they're competing among various members of the council, the mayor's office. And as you said, some people want very strict vendor enforcement, and others want us to turn around and walk the other way. So we have to learn how to follow the letter of law, walk that line, and if we think that it's time to make changes legislatively, then we might work with the members of council or the other elected bodies to propose those changes. But you can't sell police services based on who's in office and who gets the first or the last call.
Okay, well now we got a bombshell for you. We have some video that some of the homeowners from Hollywood sent to us. And we're going to have our technicians show it on the screen while we're talking. What happened was Councilwoman Jackie Goldberg and the mayor have made a declaration that we had a state of emergency, and they wanted to have the activists hand out clean needles to drug addicts with these programs in order to prevent the spread of AIDS. And on this video, it shows a squad car with the police officers there while the activists are handing out the clean needles. And this is in spite of the fact that there's a state law which basically says that it's unlawful to dispense hypodermic needles without a prescription. And we had a member of the police union on the program that to talk about it, and he said that puts the police officers in a tenuous position because they're duty-bound to uphold the state law, and yet we've got the local politicians now saying that you should turn your head. How do you feel about being put in that position?
Well, let me say this. The mayor and the council's declaration of a health emergency changed the interpretation of how the state law should be enforced. The policy was not, we didn't turn our back. The policy was that if any citizen made a complaint about the clean needle program, we would take the information from the citizen, go over to the people who were giving out the needles, take that information, contact the city attorney in most instances, sometime the district attorney, and be guided by what they said. If they said bring the people in for further investigation, we would do so. If they said verify the information is given to you and bring it in, and they'll make the decisions whether or not to file a complaint. So we didn't, in a sense, turn our back and drive away or walk away, but we didn't necessarily go out and proactively make arrests right away. If there was any feeling that the needles were being given out to minors, or there was drug activity going on, the sale or exchange of illicit drugs, my orders were very clear. You go in and you make arrests as we would in any other circumstance.
Now, one of the guests on our previous program from the homeowners group that provided the video said that Jackie Goldberg pressured Bernard Parks not to enforce the state law. This was before the mayor's action.
Let me say this, without getting into the politics of what our council people did or did not do. No council person pressured any subordinate staff of mine not to enforce the law. Whenever a subordinate asks for me if I'm out of town, they're acting with the authority that I give them, so the buck rests with the chief of police. No council person asked me, a subordinate commander, or anybody else in the department, not to enforce the law. And if they did, we didn't follow that request.
Okay, so that's erroneous information.
That's right. It's erroneous information, and we had several meetings where I went to city council and others, and I thought at that particular time we got the erroneous information corrected, but it's never too late to try to correct the record.
Well, we certainly appreciate you coming on the program today to set the record straight and let us know what's going on with the police department and how you're going to be handling these crucial questions. I want to thank Chief Willie Williams for giving us his insight on these important issues facing the Los Angeles Police Department. We want to hear from you, the viewers. How do you feel about the issue of affirmative action in the Los Angeles Police Department? Do you approve or disapprove of affirmative action programs for the Los Angeles Police Department? We want your opinion and your vote on this issue, so please call our full disclosure town hall number at 1-500-ATT-VOTE. That's 1-500-ATT-VOTE. The call will cost you only 15 cents per minute on off-peak hours, and you may leave your comments and suggestions for future programs. We also want you to send your home videos of crime and fraud and corruption so we can send it to Chief Williams, and we'll show it on a future program. And if we use your video, we'll give your name and your organization credit. And if you'd like to become a regular volunteer photojournalist for Full Disclosure, be sure and leave your name, address, and phone number. I'm Leslie Dutton. Please join us again for another edition of Full Disclosure. Thank you.